How often have you heard a politician in the last few years say something like this? I'll quote a brief paragraph. Many people watching tonight can probably remember a time when finding a good job meant showing up at a nearby factory or a business downtown. You didn't always need a degree. Your competition was pretty much limited to your neighbors. If you worked hard, chances are you'd have a job for life, with a decent paycheck and good benefits and the occasional promotion. Maybe you'd even have the pride of seeing your kids work at the same company. That world has changed, and for many the change has been painful, end quote. Now that happens to be President Obama in a State of the Union address a couple of years ago, but it could easily be almost any politician in either party at this point, with a little bit more emphasis on the cultural cohesion of that time that everyone so misses. It might have been a Republican. It might have been Mitt Romney in the last election. It might have been any one of the candidates in this election. With more explicit emphasis on low inequality of that time, it could have been Hillary Clinton. It could have been Elizabeth Warren. It often is. With poorer grammar and less coherence and more anger, it could be Donald Trump right now, calling for rolling back globalization and immigration and recovering what we've lost. America just isn't what it used to be. That's the theme of contemporary American politics. And it speaks to a public anxiety that often comes down to a question that's asked in anguish. What has happened to our country? And you know, it's not a bad question. Something big and significant certainly has happened to our country. And in its less cartoonish forms, the nostalgia that we see in today's politics is understandable. The America that our exhausted and wistful politics misses so much, the nation as it emerged from the Second World War, the Great Depression, and gradually evolved from there, was exceptionally unified and cohesive. It had at first an amazing confidence in big institutions, in big government and big labor and big business managing the nation together and meeting its needs. That confidence, by the way, is just stunning when you look at what people were saying and thinking in mid-century America from our vantage point. America's cultural life at mid-century was not much less consolidated. It was dominated by a broad, traditionalist moral consensus. Religious attendance was at a peak, families were strong, birth rates were high, divorce rates were low. And in the wake of a war in which most of its competitors had literally burned each other's economies to the ground, the United States dominated the world economy, which for a while allowed it to offer economic opportunities to all kinds of workers with all kinds of skill levels. But almost immediately after the war, that consolidated nation started a long process of unwinding, of fragmenting. Over the subsequent decades, the culture liberalized and diversified as struggles against racism coincided with a massive increase in immigration. It's important to recognize